Yo, what's up guys? We have the 10.7 meta snapshot. Lots of new comps today, so many changes we added in the galaxies as well. We're gonna go through this. We have the tier list, of course, which is here. We have the item quadrant, and we have the carousel priorities. And I also included a carousel priority for the new 4-cost carousel, so you definitely wanna look out for that when we get there. But let's just dive right into it. Quick overview. Mech Infiltrator, Cybernetics, these two are the best builds. Mech Infiltrators being by far the best. Maybe they should be S+, while Cybernetics are S tier. Next up we have Darkstar Sniper, Blaster Brawler, Vanguard Sniper in A tier, and then in B tier we have Chrono Blademaster, Protector Mystic, and in C tier we have Mech and Friends, Vanguard Mystic, Rebels, Protector Infiltrator, and then I added a new tier called like the meme tier or the for fun tier. Up to you, whatever you want to do with this. These are pretty fun builds in my opinion, but I wouldn't really recommend them because not too many of the stronger players are playing them, but anything can win at lower elo, so feel free to try these if you want to have some fun. Lastly, we have the items down here, and you can click on any of these on my website at bunnymuffins.lol/meta to go right to those relevant tiers. So first up, we have Mech Pilot Infiltrators. This is by far the strongest right now, as I said before. You really want a Quicksilver Sash and then 2 tank items on your mech. Doesn't really matter who holds it. I like Annie or Rumble depending on who I 3-star. If I can't 3-star any of them, I'd prefer them on Fizz. But generally I think Rumble's the easiest one to 3-star. Depends what level you roll at. The way I see most players playing this is they go to level 6, they play the 3 mechs, and then they play 3 additional infiltrators, Shaco, Kaisa, and Kha'Zix normally at that stage. And then they slow roll down, which means they roll down to 50 gold every turn for Shaco, Kaisa, and the Mechs. And then they continue doing this until they're very close, then they level up to level 7, add in a Lux, add in a Misfortune, depending on what you find, depending on what units you have that are strong. For example, if you have a 3-star Kaisa, you might want to add in Misfortune or a Kale for Valkyrie. But let's go down here. This is a very easy composition, so it's probably going to be the one that is the most played by most people this patch, just because it's easy to play and is the strongest. You really want 3-star Shaco, some 3-star Mechs, Shaco items, and Mech items. Kaisa's kind of like the lowest priority here, but one thing that I found that works pretty well is adding the Demolition Spatula to Kaisa. That one works out pretty well for me. So going on to our next composition, and I also have the counters here. Not all compositions I list out the counters for, just some of the ones that I make a quick note of that are easy to implement, because sometimes you can go a certain composition and then there's no way to counter a different one. So it doesn't really help if I say, oh, go Vanguards to counter snipers when you don't have a composition that can even add Vanguards. So I try to keep this as generic as possible, but you want 2 Zephyrs to counter the Mech build, 1 to counter the Mech, 1 to counter a carry. Obviously, if they build Quicksilver Sash, you won't be able to do this anymore, but in the beginning of the game, in the middle game, you'll be able to Zephyr them without too much issue. So moving on to Cybernetics. This composition is kind of like a very good comp to get 2nd or 3rd when you hit it. You really want a lot of swords. I like 2 or 3 sword items on Aurelia. You could go Guardian Angel instead of Quicksilver Sash. Echo likes Guardian Angel. Pretty much Guardian Angel is the best item in the game right now. But you really want at least 1 Infinity Edge for Aurelia. If not, I wouldn't even go the build, but this is a very strong composition, and there are a bunch of different transitions if you don't hit Echo, such as like a 3 Blademaster build. Moving on to A tier, these are the compositions that are like a little weaker than the S tier. We're going to start off with the Darkstar Snipers. I think 6 Darkstar is very consistent because you can either go Jhin or Shaco carry. I like doing both. But the thing about Shaco is that you don't need to 3-star him like in the Infiltrator builds. So having a 2-star Shaco, 2-star Jhin, perfectly okay, which makes this one of the few compositions that doesn't need a 2-star Legendary and doesn't need a 3-star carry unit. So that makes this composition pretty consistent. Also, since you're Darkstar, you also have the option of going the Darkstar Spatula, so it's no issue if you're missing one of the random Darkstar units because you could just get the Spatula item. One of the counters to this is Vanguard Sniper, and also Disarm is pretty useful if you're playing Blasters. It's essentially like a pretty long stun on Shaco or Jhin if you manage to proc it. Next composition we have is Blaster Brawler. This composition's, I thought it would be stronger, but pretty much since Mech pilots are so popular, Blasters don't really get the full effect of their Blaster trait, because you're really just hitting one big guy. And Blitzcrank doesn't really help against that composition too much as well. But it's still a very strong composition. You want at least 1 red buff I like having it on either Ezreal or Jinx. If you don't get full Jinx items, having a red buff on her is perfectly okay, but I like having double Giant Slayer, Guardian Angel, and then red buff on either Misfortune or Ezreal, depending on when I hit them. So you want to use like Lucian as your item holder here, and then sell them off, and then give the items to Jinx, Ezreal, or Misfortune, depending on when you hit it. But this is a pretty good composition. One counter to it is using Infiltrators to kill Jinx. Next up, we have Vanguard Sniper. This composition is really weird because there are a lot of different moving pieces to it. Like, you want to get a 3-star Mordekaiser, but you also want a 2-star Jhin. So does that mean you slow roll at level 5? And then once you hit Mordekaiser, you level up to level 7 or 8 to start rolling for Jhin. There's not really enough gold to do all of that, so there's really kind of like a mix and matching. I'd recommend this composition actually on the Nico verse, because getting a lot of Nikos means that you could get Mordekaiser 3 pretty easily, and even save one later for Jhin. Because once you get both of them, none of the other stuff matters too much. Yeah, some of the counters here is Infiltrators to kill Jhin, CC for Mordekaiser if he is 3-star. If he's 2-star, you don't really need to counter him. I like Lulu the most for this because then you could deal more damage to him as well. Going into the B tier, these compositions are still very good. They could still win games. They could still get 2nd or 3rd or top 4s, but they're just not as strong as the A or S tier compositions. The first one I want to introduce to you guys is 4 Chrono 3 Blademaster. You'll notice that we only have 6 people here, and that means this composition is very flexible. You have 2 slots that you could add whatever you want in there. So if you have a very strong Kayle, add in Valkyrie. If you're facing a lot of magic damage, add in Mystics. Maybe you randomly hit a 2-star Cho'Gath, you could go Brawlers. The options are pretty much limitless. The only requirements of this composition is good Kayle items. Nothing else really matters here other than just playing the required units. But one thing to note is that you could also take out 2 Chronos. So you could take out Thresh and Wukong in order to play 4 Brawlers, and maybe that could be a decent tank line as well. Again, this is probably the most flexible composition right now. That's why the difficulty is pretty high, but since you can go in any direction, since you're really just using whatever you hit, the variance is pretty low. Moving on to the next composition is Protector Mystic. I saw this composition falling off a little bit towards the end of last patch, but in this patch, it really fell off. There's only really one player playing it right now who's in the top 10. So it just lost a lot of its steam. I'm guessing it's because snipers are pretty strong against this composition, because even with Bramble Vest, they could just build Last Whisper to kill your Xin. But this composition definitely feels a lot weaker, and if it's ever contested, you can't really go for it because it's going to be very hard to get 3-star Xin, Rakan, and Sona. But moving on to the C tier, we have the first comp is Mech and Friends. Since Gangplank got nerfed, this composition got a lot worse. That's why it's in C tier. I wouldn't really recommend playing this, especially since there's so many other better Mech versions out there, such as Mech Infiltrators. Moving on to the next composition is Vanguard Mystic. This one's very similar to the Protector comp, except it's just worse in every way because it's so hard to hit Mordekaiser 3-star right now because everyone's going for Dark Stars through either Vanguard Sniper or Dark Star Sniper, so it's pretty much impossible to hit this composition, which is why it's in C tier right now. Pretty much there are just better options whenever you want to play a comp around Mordekaiser now. Last up, we have Rebels. Or actually not last up. Next we have Rebels. We have all the nerfs hit this composition the hardest. Gangplank got nerfed, Misfortune got nerfed, Aurelion Soul got nerfed. So when all 3 of your carries get nerfed pretty hard, the composition's not going to last that long. It's still playable. I don't think it's D tier or anything like that, but I've seen it win, but no one has to go for it, and you have to hit it very easily in order for this to work. A lot of variables there, so you could still play it. Playing 3 Rebels is very strong early game, but going for the 6 Rebel late game, it's just not as good as it was before. Next up, we have Protector Infiltrators. This one's just like a worse version of the Mech Infiltrator comp. I don't even know why I'm including this anymore because no one really plays this. This might be even like, this comp I would say is in D tier. Next up, we have the meme tier. So these are pretty much the for fun comps. Essentially, if you're not in the top 10, the best thing you can achieve from playing Teamfight Tactics is to have fun. After all, this is a game, so if you're not trying to go pro, I highly recommend going for these compositions. Or if you're not trying to climb, you could go Star Guardian Sorcerers. A lot of Korean players are playing Sorcerers, both Star Guardian Sorcerers and Mech Pilot Sorcerers, and they're in the top 10 there. But the metas are a little different between North America, Europe versus Korea. So maybe since they play different compositions, sorcerers are working out pretty decently. I think I saw 2 people in the top 5 in Korea play a bunch of sorcerers every now and then. But you really want a 3-star Syndra with Seraphs and Hat and another ability power or mana item. Same thing down here for Mech Pilot sorcerers. It's really just dependent on getting your Syndra to 3-star and then putting a bunch of mage items on her. The last composition we have is 4 Space Pirates. This one's super fun because you get a ton of gold, a ton of items. You really just need Guardian Angel on Gangplank and a lot of ability power on Gangplank. After that, you want to itemize your mech, and since you get so many items from this build because Gangplank pretty much kills everything, and then you get a bunch of gold and a bunch of items from the Space Pirate trait, you can pretty much itemize everyone on your backline and even have items for Thresh targets to pull in every turn. So it's a hilarious composition. I highly recommend trying this. It's super fun. You might not win because getting Gangplank is still pretty difficult because he is a legendary unit, but you don't need any 3-stars in this. You just power level to level 8 and then roll down for Gangplank, pray that you hit him, and then put a bunch of Guardian Angels and Rabadons onto him and hope for the best after that. But that's it for the compositions. Let's move into the items. So the way I do the item priority is I look at a lot of different replays from top players and see which items people fight for the most. By far, the 2 best items are Sword and Chain Vest because Guardian Angel is the best item in the game right now. So there's a huge drop-off after Sword and Chain Vest. Pretty much you always want to be going for this in the first carousel because they're just that much higher than the rest of these items. After that, you want Rod and Tier, and then after that, all these 4 items are kind of very low priority. You never really want to go for any of these. So if you want to like play it safe, you could go for a Rod or a Tier if you don't want to fight for Sword or Chain Vest. But after that, you don't really care what you get. Next up, I added a 4-cost carousel priority for the Lilac Nebula. So this one's very tricky. You want both a good champion with a good item for that champion. So the item doesn't have to be super strong in this carousel because as long as the champion can use the item that they have on it, it's going to be a strong pick. For example, if I get a Jinx with the belt, that's not going to be too bad because I could build even though belt is a low priority item, because I could build a red buff on Jinx with that belt. And if I don't end up hitting the Chain Vest, I could always just sell her for gold. So with that in mind, we want one of the good champions with at least a decent item on them. So the good champions right now are Aurelia, Jinx, Kayle, and Jhin. And this is because they're either very strong in the meta or they work really well early game. And then you want an okay item on them. If you get a good champion with a bad item on them, they're essentially useless, so you just sell them for the item. The middle of the pack champions right now are Cho'Gath, Vel'Koz, and Fizz. Sometimes you could go for Mech Pilots really early with Fizz, but I wouldn't really recommend playing one of these 3 units unless you have like a perfect item for them. And then lastly, we have the bad tier, which is Wukong and Soraka. You never really want to be playing these champions, so only go for these 2 if they have like a sword on them, just because you're taking the sword and then selling this champion. Next up, we have the item quadrant. This one I sort by how strong they are and how versatile they are. So you want items in the top right quadrant. Right now, the best item is Guardian Angel by far, followed by Zephyr. Some of the changes I made here was Force of Nature is actually a little weaker now because the spatula items are really good. I like Demolitionist Spatula, for example, a lot, but you could also build like Dark Star, Celestial based on whatever you're playing. I probably need to lower the Rebel Spatula here. I think I forgot to do that. It probably should be somewhere down here just because Rebels are much weaker right now. Other changes I made is Titan's Resolve is a lot stronger because mechs are using it a lot, and also QSS is a little stronger because it's so important on your mechs. If you haven't realized yet, this meta is being defined by mech pilots. Lastly, down here you could read what I do for how I figure out this meta snapshot, but that's pretty much it here. Again, let's go back to the top to try to see the summary. And again, Mech Infiltrator, Cybernetics, you want to be playing these as much as you can. Dark Star Snipers, Vanguard Snipers are very good because they both rely on Jhin. So if you hit Jhin, go either one of these 2 versions. Blaster Brawlers are really good, especially since no one's playing Rebels anymore. It's a lot easier to hit Blasters. And then after that, you want to try to only go for these compositions if you are not hitting anything else. But yeah, that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I'll be back next week with a new meta snapshot just on my website, bunnymuffins.lol/meta. And I'll also be streaming this weekend from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. US Eastern Time. at twitch.tv/bunnymuffinslol. I got a bunch of videos lined up for next week. I am going to be working on the leveling guide this week, so hopefully I can release that sometime soon for the set 3 leveling guide. But apart from that, that's it from me today. Good luck on the convergence.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to share and subscribe, and of course smash that like button. Each like is an LP I gain before the next video.